Hello, Margaret. Sorry. We'll give people like 2 minutes and then we'll just go ahead and start, knowing that people can watch after. Heidi Ho Kim. Oh, I am glad you like this set. Thanks, Margaret. Hi, Rosie. I have my laptop on so I can see as you guys pop in, and if you ask questions, there's always that delay of when you guys type and then it sits there. Hi, Carla. Oh my gosh, while you're at a soccer game. Shoot. I'm doing okay, Kim. Thanks for asking. So still in crazy mode. I don't know at this point if it's ever not going to be in crazy mode with our family. So both my girls are at college. One is at Fairbanks and the other is in Iowa. So Alaska and Iowa. And then John, his new job is month on, month off, meaning he works a month and then he's off for a month. And that's in Barrow, Alaska, which if you're curious, you can look that up. It's the very northernmost point in the United States. So it's way, way above the Arctic Circle and all of that good stuff. So he's there for a month and then home for a month, what we're calling home at this point, which is our house in Palmer, Alaska. And then because we don't have kids at home, I'm kind of starting now to travel back and forth with him. So this month I'm in Palmer. He currently is on a hunt. I mean, it never ends. So I never know. And it changes from day to day, what day we're leaving to go where. And so I feel like a little bit we live out of suitcases and it's a little crazy. Hey, Mary Pat. So yeah, we're good. I think crazy. It's beautiful today in Alaska. So it's only 1 p.m. here and it's probably one of the more startling, beautiful fall days there can be. The sky is actually blue and the leaves are turning on all the birch trees, which kind of look like aspen, if you've ever been around aspen. So it's gorgeous yellow. So my view outside is amazing that I have in front of me going on. So yes, Carla, it's more than an adventure. I feel like I'm chasing my tail and there's no reason to be, because I kind of work and I kind of don't, but it's so in flux all the time that I don't even know what to do with myself half the time. So anyways, what we're going to do today, because I haven't done this in a long time online, and I know I might have talked about it here some, but going through Copic reds, a lot of people are really cautious when they approach the Copic reds because they tend to be a fairly volatile color. That has nothing to do with Copic. It has everything to do with the color red and the pigments that are used to create the color red. So red is a volatile color in any medium. You're going to see some of the same issues with watercolor, tempera, acrylic, oil pastel. It's a really persnickety pigment. And so you end up with some unique traits, and it varies by medium, but we're going to go over kind of what that means for you in the world of Copics. And part of this reason is, one, we're kind of approaching the holiday season, which is flooded with reds. And so it's good to know how to work with them, because even if you're using kind of an off, not necessarily your traditional holiday colors, a lot of times you're still working with pinks and peaches and things that are in that realm of reds and greens. And so we'll kind of do this very minimal touch on green here at the end, but I thought we can look at a very holiday stamp set, which is the Poinsettia set. And there are a couple poinsettias in the set, and then different foliage and a bunch of different sediments. I can't even say that word. That's probably why I don't use them very well. But I thought that'd be a fun one to tackle, and we can look at a bunch of different ways to approach your reds. So in the Copic world, your reds, the biggest issues that people have is they have a little bit of trouble blending them. And we'll talk about that. But the biggest issue is that they tend to bleed, meaning they move a lot further than some of their other colors, your other colors do. And so it's hard to keep them inside an image, kind of within the lines or within the areas you're trying to keep them. And then if you go to try to correct them, they don't correct. Once that ink, that pigment kind of touches down on whatever paper you use, and some are going to work better than others, but once it hits that paper, it really attaches itself to those fibers. And so you have very little recourse getting those colors back. You can't use the colorless blender how you do to kind of push at colors to make corrections. It's going to sit there you can lighten it, but you're always going to have a shadow of that color left behind. You're not going to get a great movement. Now, the Copic range of reds, and I've got videos on this stuff, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it, but the range of reds, like if we look at big handful of all the reds, the R0s, which most of the like Copic colors, if you look at the zeros, they tend to be kind of the most saturated of that color. Here's like an R08. So that should be like a really bold red color. And it's not. It kind of looks orange, at least to our visual sense. Even the R1s, this is the R17, tends to have a little bit of that orangey tint to it, or what we think of as orange visually. The R29. So we've desaturated that. We know that because our first number is that 2. We've added a little bit of gray to the mix. Hey, Florence. So you end up with this range that goes from the R0s that have almost an orange feel to them, even though they're the most saturated of that group, meaning they don't have any gray added. They don't have anything else added. It's the base color of red. And we go all the way into things like R8s, like the R85, which has a bunch of gray added, and suddenly it doesn't even look red anymore. What we would call that is pink. Well, it's still that base color. We've had the gray added in, and we've had some amounts of colorless blender, depending on that last number on the marker. So it's this unusual range, and what we call red tends to be in those R2s to R4s, maybe a little bit R5s. Those look red to us visually, but that same pigment is creating something that has a little bit of an orangier feel to it. And even then when you get into the R8s and have added all that gray, it ends up looking a little more like a pinkish, dusty rose color. Some of those colors blend more easily. Some do not. The ones that to our eyes visually look the most red, the R2s, actually sometimes are trickier to blend. And so we're going to look at a couple different things that can help you. And while we're doing that, we're going to talk about how to make sure you're keeping things in the lines. I'm going to see if I can enlarge one of these a little bit more without destroying clarity. So one of the things you can do is you can try blending in a different way than what you're used to. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you are a person who always goes light to dark, I would encourage you to try going dark to light. If you're a person who always goes dark to light, I would encourage you to go light to dark. So switch up how you're coloring. If you're struggling with a blend, this doesn't necessarily work, but for a lot of people, sometimes this helps. So if you were going to go light to dark, if you're going to give that a try, we're going to take one petal And I'm going to do a series of R2s because those are tricky. So I'm going to do R21, R24, and R29. That's a really common group. We're going to start with the R21. And what I'm going to do, typically if you're going light to dark, you would fill the entire area of the petal in with your lightest color. I'm going to do most of that, but I'm going to stop shy of the edge. Remember that issue of colors tending to bleed? I want to give myself a little leeway. R24 is my middle tone. So now I'm going to start near that black line. And depending on how you want to shade your petal, I'm going to have a little bit of dark going down that center line. And then from the base of the leaf up, I'm going to leave kind of the heart of the petal, because it's really a petal. And then the tip a little bit lighter. R29 is my darkest in this particular, and I'm going to go in the same areas, just smaller amounts. Remember that second step where I'm choosing to put the shading is oftentimes the hardest step, because I'm mapping it out at that point. Where do I want to add that shading? And now I've finally eaten up all of the white right at that base and along that edge. I still have a tiny, tiny bit at the tip of the flower, because when you go light to dark, now I hit reverse and I'm putting more ink on the page. So I'm backing up to R24. I'm starting where I have the R29 and pulling it further out, because I just did the coloring. That should help, should being the key word. Going into that R24 a little bit further, so going over what I already did, but smoothing the R29 as I go. And then going back in with the R21. So I've got that center of the petal pretty wet, and so it's gonna soften up and blend a little more easily. And then right at the end, I'm gonna go right to the tip of that petal and fill the white. So now I've got a fairly well blended petal. I did bleed out a tiny bit right over on the edge, and that's on me. I pushed the ink a little too much, but you have to play with it, and every type of paper is going to react differently, and you have to give yourself some forgiveness too. The other thing, I am working on a glass workstation, and so my ink is going to stay wet a little bit longer, and it's going to move a little more fluidly. Now, if I put a piece of paper, which a lot of us are trained right from the get-go, I actually train people to do that. Put your white sheet of paper underneath your working space. That alcohol is going to dry a lot quicker. Two things: it won't blend as easily, but you won't get as much movement either, and so you might hold it in a little bit tighter. So that's one way. If you're doing light to dark, I again think about not going to that edge quite as far, and that could help. The other way to do this is to go in the opposite direction. Just start with the dark color first. So let's move over to another petal. And this time we're going to start with that R29. And I'm going to do a similar look. I'm going to come along that bottom edge. I'm going to come up the underside of that little vein. And I'll go around just barely the edge of the petal. Okay, so stop there. Immediately go to that middle tone, the R24. And I'm going to start on the R29, but I'm not going all the way out to the black line. If I can, I'm going to avoid that. And I'm going to come from the R29 and pull so it softens the edge of the R29. I can see that softening up, but it's not allowing the ink to go further than my edge. So the R21 is last. Now I want to focus right on the edge of that R24 because I know this is where it's going to tip it right over the edge if I do too much. And it gets trickier as you add those lighter colors like the R21 because there's more alcohol in there. So here's leaf number 2. Similar finish look. The only place I got a little bit of push out is over on the side. And what happened there, you can see it's the R21 as it came closer. That's what actually pushed it into that nearby petal. Kim is saying she would be terrified to use that much ink. Oh, I'm sorry. But sometimes to get that kind of blend, if you're looking for a smoother blend, that is what it takes. So let's do this. Let's do 2 more petals. We'll do 1 light to dark and 1 dark to light. And then we'll shift and I'll show you a whole different group of reds that actually blend in even easier. So let's do the R21. And again, we're going to start kind of at the center of the petal. We'll leave a bunch of white space around that. And if I go quicker, it actually works better. So me explaining along the way kind of doesn't necessarily help what I'm doing. You're a chicken. You're not a chicken. Good grief. You're one of the braver women I know doing what you do with a business. You are extremely brave, Kim. Maybe not with Copics, and that's okay. All right, so I've got all 3 laid down. You can it looks like a little bit of a topographical map. And you can see by doing it a little bit quicker, I've also laid down a lot less ink. So R24, all I'm trying to do is soften the edge of that R29, pull it a little further into those light areas. And I'm going to start right in the core of the petal and then hit the tip. But what you're going to notice on this second round is we're going to have even less bleeding because I'm not talking as much and I'm going a little bit faster. Not as much ink. And like Kim said, the less ink you can do that with, the more it's going to hold into your petal. All right, last one with this color combo. Let's do 1 more dark to light. Starting with that R29. And see, I mean, half the time I'm going to make a mistake on my own anyway. R24. What I love about an image like this, though, a lot of my red mistakes are going to be covered up with the next petal. And so as they're kind of munching together, a lot of that you lose as you go. So I'm not super concerned. And I'll be honest, at this point in my coloring, I give a lot of grace in a lot of my coloring. It's like, nope, just getting it done, doing it, setting it to the side. I'm good to go. And I'm happy with it. So that's really more what Copic coloring becomes to me, is that I enjoy the process. I enjoy coloring. And so then I forgive myself for the mistakes that happen along the way. And I give myself I understand that some of these are trickier to work with and some of them don't blend as happily together. So one way you can avoid some of that red angst altogether is pick different colors. So one of the combos that I know a lot of people enjoy using is the R8s. Now, it's kind of an unusual group. And let me kind of show you more of the full range. I'll go kind of in an empty space on the page. So this is the darkest of the R8s. That is an R89. Yeah, I'm with you, Carla. It is so much more about the process of enjoying it. If you don't enjoy it, switch to something else, because this is about fun. So R85 is actually the step down. There's really nothing in between there. So it's a big jump to R85. Now I'm going to throw things around. R83 and R81. So what you'll see a lot of people use is this series, the R81, R83, R85. And notice I did nothing there, and they've already almost blended perfectly together. I barely overlapped them, and they immediately just kind of oozed into each other, kind of smushed. That's my favorite blending word. They smushed into each other. So literally with basically hitting it once, we almost completely disappeared those little break lines. So one of the ways to make reds easier is pick a different red combo. Let's go dark to light, because I think with reds that tends to be easier for me. So R85, and I'm going to color them similar to what I've done over here. I'm going to come right up that little vein in the petal and right along the base. And even though I think in our heads poinsettias are red, I think we can fudge that. I think we can go to the rosier pink tones, and I think we can also go to whites. So this is the R83 and R81. That's it. It sits tight because there's barely any ink on there, and then it just, yeah, it's so easy. So if you wanted to do light to dark, if that just is your go-to, you really, that's how you like to color. And having been a person who taught that way for a long time, I get it. And for some people, that is still the easier route to go. They get a smoother blend, they're happier with their results, and that is just fine. I actually have come to the point where I use both. So I go dark to light and light to dark, depending on the situation. So I've gone light, medium, dark, and now I'm going to go back to my medium. I almost could get away without doing that. And back to my light. And really all I'm going to do with the light is I'm going to start at that tip and flick back in. Now, I want to show you the two side by side. I do have a tiny bit of bleeding with going light to dark. Again, more ink by the nature of the beast, but it almost smooths it to the point that I lose the contrast. And for me, that's not okay. I still want to see those darker colors. And by going light to dark, I've almost lost those darkest tones. Now I could go back and hit it again, but now I'm adding more ink and I've already started bleeding. So again, you have to play with what works for you. So I want to show you one more thing with this group, because I do like this group. What if we add the R89? And that's going to push this even further. So if we do the dark to light and go right into that corner with the R89, and then we're going to go from there. So R85. Now this might take a little bit more, but I'm going to try to play just right on that edge and not push it too far. R8-3. And R8-1. So again, here's one more push for contrast. Now, the R8-9 to R8-5 is a bigger jump, so you do need a little bit more blending, but it does push it to that next level and deepens that color. You can do the same thing on the R2s. You can add something like an R5-9 or the R8-9 and push it even further. But with R2-9, I think if you're going for that brighter red and there's smaller images, you can kind of decide, go one way or the other on that one. And some of that depends on how confident you are with your reds if you want to add that fourth color. One other thing I want to show you before we talk a little bit about greens, and I'll double check. We have like tons of time. So one of the other really neat things about this group, and it's the R8-5s, is how the R8s fade to white. So a couple ways you could do white petals is you could use an R8-1. Now, typically it's not going to fade to white, but if I use the R8-1 and then come back with a colorless blender. Ooh, this one's got a bunch of, I'm gonna make a mess. And all I have to do is brush back into, barely, folks, barely. I literally did like 3 swipes, 1, 2, 3 little flicks into that R8-1. And we have this really pretty fade from pink to white. So if you have not tried that before, do that on the side somewhere. Kind of get your pink going in one direction. Sorry, it wasn't on the screen. Let's try that again. Do your R8-1. So it's nice and smooth going from one direction out, and then bring that colorless blender and try just one pass. See what you get. And if you need to, you can come right back at those tips a little bit more. And you can play with how much. It's going to push. This is one of the few reds that you actually can push and pull pretty easily. As you get darker, it gets harder, but the R8-1 actually softens really, really well. So one other option, and you can see, I don't know if you guys can see this on my glass mat. The reds are volatile, ladies. I'm assuming we're all ladies today. In terms of the amount of ink I'm using, I appreciate it looks like I'm using a lot, but because I'm going fairly quick, I'm not using a ton, but the reds just have that oomph. They have that power. You're going to see more of that coming through the back of your image than anything else. So one other, I was trying to think what color I want to use. I could use a gray. But I'm kind of wishing it's something, I don't know. It's probably too light. Because if I did a yellow, I mean, some of the yellows look so lemony. The Y0s are like, yikes. What would, here, let's open another technology device. Yeah, let's do that. Let's look up a poinsettia. Because I only have my phone and laptop going. Let's open the iPad too. All right. I want to, what about, No, not that. White poinsettia. Well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get this under. Oh, I don't want a coupon. No. This is going to not show up very well, but it'll at least get you like it's not even clear on my screen, like on my iPad screen. But the leaves are kind of a yellowish white. There, that's better. So this is the plant I'm thinking of kind of the white, oh good grief, the white poinsettia. So that being said, actually, that looks pretty good. So this is actually a Y00. So I could use that if I was doing the yellow leaves. And I would do it just like what I did on the R8 one, is that I do that yellow and then barely push in with my colorless blender. Now, if you want to do poinsettias fast, blending to white is going to go even faster than trying to fill the whole leaf. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing all of the petals at once. It might overwhelm you just a bit, but just to show you how quickly you could do an entire flower. And obviously a reminder to everyone, remind yourself how long Michelle has been coloring with Copics. I have been coloring with Copics since my older daughter was about 4 years old or 3, and she is now 21. So give yourself a little break. We could do the same, literally that same kind of speed with the R8 one. So if you aren't a fan of the kind of almost limey, yellowy brightness and any of the colors that blend well with a colorless blender, you could do this with. So you could warm it up a little bit. In fact, let's do this. Instead of going with our pink, what if, oh, okay, here. Do I want that one? Do I want this one? Oh, this is even better. Okay. So if I still want to have some yellow in there, what if we went with a little bit more peach, which we add the red back in? This is a YR 000. And I could probably do the double, but the lighter the color is to start, typically the easier it's going to be to blend out with that colorless blender. And I know, and it's obviously it's got more alcohol in it already, less pigment, less ink. So it's going to fade out or kind of soften with that colorless blender even more easily. So that was the YR 000. We're going to come back in. And remember, it's kind of on a central axis, right? It's circular, a flower is. So spin it. I've kind of trained my hands because of all the videoing I have done to go in every which way so I can keep my image upright. But I would highly, highly encourage you to keep spinning your image as you go. It's going to be a lot easier. So take a few seconds to do that part. Okay, so now we've got 2 really light poinsettias. And again, seconds, like really, really fast if you want to go quicker. I'm just realizing, looking at my screen as it's still flipping around, that you're getting some blur in and out with my hand going because I've got it so enlarged. So I apologize for that, but I think this still helps a little bit more for you guys to see what's going on. So, all right. The one other thing I wanted to give you guys a quick tip on, because it's coming up with the holiday seasons as well, is your greens, because that's another high use color when we hit the holiday season. So here's the deal, because, and I think other Copic instructors have talked about this recently, about greens in general, is we get asked all the time, what reds do you use? What greens do you use? What blues do you use? You know, and we can give you a list of things we use the most, but greens is a tricky one, and people ask me which ones I use, and I use really odd combos. They like jump around in saturation, meaning I don't necessarily go, I use G24, G28, you know, this little series of G2s. A lot of times I mix something in. And the reason for that is the Gs tend to be not happy blenders. They tend to not really like each other, and they make it really tricky to blend. So I'm, as much as anything, this is more about giving you guys some color combos that tend to work. Let's see if I can, there we go. Get you guys zoomed out a little bit. And what I'll do is I'll write these kind of, I'll do what we usually do when I do one of these lives. I'll take a photos at the end, and I'm going to write down the colors I used on each of the flowers, even though we're not really finishing. So you guys know what we kind of talked about and what we were working on. But we've got a leaf on each of them. So let's you look at a couple different color combos. So one of the really common ones out there is like a G24 and a G28. And then a lot of people will use like, or try to use like a G20 with that to get the lightest color. So off to the side here, let's look at what that looks like. So this is my G20, and it's super, super light. It's literally called wax white, not a green. It's called wax white. My G24 has been this way for a long time. It's one of the classic markers, so it's square. But I've put a brush nib in it, so it looks a little funky. And then G28. So it's making messes. It's a gorgeous combo, and it's definitely even increments, but it is huge increments. It is huge gaps between the light, the medium, and the dark. So we've already kind of tied our hands a little bit and made this a difficult blending situation. However, you can blend those together. You can work that edge of the G28 and soften the look between the two. It's a little bit of work, or a lot of work, but you can do it. You can do the same with the G20, but just the same, it's going to be a lot of work. A lot of back and forth. So we can get there, but it's a ton of ink. It doesn't move as far. So like I could do this and keep this in this leaf. I can do it, but it's a lot. It's going to be a push. It's going to be some effort. So it is a valid combination. And we'll even put it here now. G20, G24, G28. That's what that guy is. So it's a nice combination. What I have found, for whatever reason, if I can find it in my bag o' tricks, except now it's hiding. Well, good grief. I have managed to lose. I do this all the time to myself. Like, manage to hide one marker on myself. What did I do with that marker? I don't know. There's that one. And part of it is I do not put mine back in these little, like, individual slots. I have just big open holes that mine go in, which works most of the time. All right. Good grief. That is being completely uncooperative. Well, I wonder if this will work similarly. I'm sure it's not in here. No, I've officially hidden it on myself, and maybe it's not a color and I'm making that up. No, it's literally already on my table. Oh, okay. Yeah. Here's my G28 again. This is a G17. Whole different color, but oh, look what it does to the G28. And then and this is where it struggles a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of G24, but it does a job. If you wanted something darker, this is an option of putting the G17 in between. And that helps soften that G28. It actually is a combo that I like. So let's do this. What if we did something else? Because I like the G28. I like that color. But what if we chose something else at the other end instead of the 2-4? Let's try something. What if we did G17 and then, well, there's, that is a G14. I'm liking that better. Now it goes really bright. It's completely different than the G2s. The G1s have less gray in them and end up looking like they have more yellows to them. So for this leaf, and again, I will mark these for you guys. We're going to do G28. We're going to do G17. And because I'm jumping from the 2s to the 1s, I am going to kind of go back into that G28 a little bit more than I normally would, because it changes the feel of it. And then I'm starting from the edge with the G14 and pushing back in. All right, so this one is G28, G17, G14. And the petals are R29, R24, and R21. That's what this particular combo is. Let's shift over to here because there's another option, and that is adding more Y to the mix. Like, and obviously that's actually what happened here. The other way you can do that though is switch either completely over to it or adding a YG to it. So let's see if we do start with that. And then, where am I? My guess is this is going to be. I'll tell you what I'm doing here in just a second. So that isn't a YG. I'm thinking, I didn't give myself enough wiggle room. So, rethinking, what if, because that's kind of a cool combo. Let's see what this one. Yeah. So this is going to switch gears. So this one is much brighter. And this is what we just did, the G28, G17, G14. And this stayed in that G range. This is getting really washed out. I'm still going to use that G28 for the darkest. But then I'm using two YGs. Now the trick though is that in this particular case, I'm using YGs that have a lot of gray in them, that have been desaturated. They have a bunch of gray added in. So that's G28, and I'll write all this down. And then I've got a YG67, which is a pretty common one in people's bags these days, the YG6s, which is still pretty dark. And then I'm shifting to YG63. What I like about this combo, and I'll kind of flip it around when I get done here. What I really like about this combo is, to me, it feels more congruent, or feels more in tune with the R8s. That it's a little bit washed down. It has that little bit of gray to it. So this leaf is G28 again, but then it's YG67 and YG63. There's like hundreds of combos out there. I'm just telling you right now, you could go silly with this, but I want to show you two other options for greens. So switching to a whole different green group, because there's a couple different greens that I think actually work better. And again, there it is. I knew I had this one. One of the green combos that I think blends better is the G4s. So we'll put this on this leaf. So you're going to notice right off the bat, the G46, which is the darkest in that group, is not super dark. But G46, G43, and it blends so much easier than the G2s do. And then G40 gets really light. So if I wanted to stay on that lighter end with a natural blending group, this is one way to do it. The G4s. So G46, G43, G40. Now, if I wanted to push the contrast, you could probably come in with that G28 or G29 right at that base of the leaf. And you're probably gonna, the G46 will actually be okay with that, if you want. So tiny letters, G to 8. If you wanted to push the contrast, you don't have to. That's up to you. So let's see, that was the other one I wanted to show you. G8s and 9s work pretty well as well, but a lot of people don't have those in their like repertoire. They don't own those. The whole other direction you can go is with something completely like much brighter, like way brighter, and go away from the greens altogether and shift over to the YGs. So one thing you could do is shift over to YGs. Now the YG zeros are bright. They're almost like this in that they become almost neon. So one of the ways I avoid that becoming mind-boggling is I'll usually use, or you can use, a YG6 in the mix. So a lot of times my darkest one will be either the YG63 or the YG67. And then I switch to a YG03. And you're going to notice right away, this is a whole different little animal. It's going to get really bright, really fast. And YG01, you can even tell by the cap that that's going to go really bright. But the advantage is that YG zeros, or the YG family in general, blend way easier than the G's. They just do. All of them do. So this is YG63, YG03, and YG01. And again, if you wanted to go darker, YG67. And that's not on there, but it's an option. So we have all sorts. Let's see. And then this was Y00 and the colorless blender. This was what we'd end up doing. YR000 and 0. And then the only one I haven't written on yet is this guy. And these are the darkest color. Remember that was our 8, 9. And it's only on this one. So I'll make a little arrow. It's only on this guy. It's the only one that has the 8, 9. And we have R8, 5, R8, 3, R8, 1. So poinsettias, you've got a bunch of different color combos, leaves and petals. And we talked a little bit about controlling those reds, of keeping them contained where we want them a little bit more. And also the greens, helping those mix a little bit better, or ignore them altogether and go with YGs that are a little bit brighter. But if you have some of the desaturated ones, like if you go up into the 80s and 90s, I don't know if there's 80s. There's not. If you go into the 90s or even the 40s, the 4s, that even looks a little bit blue, like has more blue in it. Anyway, the YGs have options and they tend to be better blenders no matter what. So 2 things. Thank you, Margaret. I am super glad you learned a bunch. What I will do is what I have done in the past is I will take photos of these and I will attach them in a separate, they get lost if I stick them in the comments with you guys. So what I will do is I'll do a separate post, and then this will be, but in the Facebook group, but I'll put a separate post saying this is what we did today. So you guys can come back and kind of reference that. And I'm sorry it's not fitting all in the screen, but And I was trying to shrink, but oh, there it goes, finally. That way you can do a screenshot if you want it as well. There we go. Anyways, I think that was really it. That's what I wanted to cover today, because I know a lot of people have questions, and we're hitting holidays. We're getting close. We're getting closer. Yay, yay, yay. So I thought reds and greens, poinsettias, that would be helpful for your upcoming crafty projects. All right, ladies. Thank you so much, those of you that were able to come. And as always, if you are stopping in after, anytime you guys have questions for me specifically, make sure to tag me. Make sure to put my name in there. And that way it'll kind of give me a little heads up. Or you're more than welcome to message me on Facebook too. All right? All right. Way to go, everybody. You guys have an awesome rest of your Sunday and have a wonderful week ahead. Thanks so much.